Good morning, everyone, and I'm so sorry to wing it again, people. But, it's interesting. In the last video, I had shown you this picture of Nahaleu, and it was here just north of the southernmost point in the U.S., and boy is it windy down there. And it's really not much of a tourist spot. They can't get anything to happen there, although there were a lot of these big windmills that had been put up, but I don't think they were really in production anymore. It was like these weird windmill farms. I don't know if we'll see any pics of those or not, but yes, here's like kind of the only tree. So it was a really super windy place, and Terence McKenna had moved there from Opihikau, which was a totally different sort of part of the Big Island, and it was this really magical place in the 70s. I just went to photographs from Opihikau in the 70s. It really got laid to waste in the mid-90s. Really, at the time I was there was a lot of destruction going on. There were people who were, trying to save little lagoons in different parts of it. I remember a little sort of area, but it was becoming these papaya plantations, and they were taking down all of these incredible places, and there were a lot of also black volcanic rock walls that were, made by the Menehune, as the legends go. So once again, these are all on the road to Opihikau 70s pics that I'm showing you. I don't know what it's like now, and that's probably why Terence had moved, but this was really this kind of magical, dreamlike place. And I don't know if any of you know who Terence is or not. He's sort of a big mouthful to explain. Here we are looking at the map of the Big Island, so you can see Opihikau is over right there in this kind of, and here is a sort of Opihikau kind of state park. And I think it's interesting, the most haunted places. Oh, Mackenzie State Park, they're saying, is one of the most haunted places. This is Terence, and Terence was an ethnobotanist, kind of wild man, sort of post Timothy Leary, as it were, psychonaut, and rather brilliant philosopher, just sort of almost leprechaunish spirit, and he wrote the Archaic Revival, among other books. And most of his books, a lot of his books were written sort of in the 70s and 80s, and then he became sort of discovered, as it were, in the 90s, and he said it was strange just to go from obscurity to this kind of pop star, echelon type person. And he was really, it was interesting. There was a woman named Maria Sabina who lived in Mexico, and as a child it was found out that when she took her little sisters into the forest, because I believe they came from a large and overwhelmed family, and at the age of 3 she was carrying an infant and taking care of them, and Maria Sabina would go into the forest in Mexico, and no one had realized until she was about 10 that she was eating psychedelic mushrooms all the time. And I think that the little kiddos were too, but she was this kind of, she had sort of started her own cult or religion or whatever in the woods, like at the age of 3. This is all true, by the way. It's an interesting story. And she became then there was a Catholic church there. And what the priest did was they ended up realizing this was too powerful. They weren't going to be able to sort of take it away from her, but they also just integrated it, and they told her she could continue to take them, but that she had to get them blessed first at the church. So she would just go get them blessed. And she was famous. She's sort of, the root of people like Wasson, who was the banker, but also was the person who wrote the psychedelic articles. In the next video, I'll bring the Life magazine picture up, where they, had, the kind of psychedelic revolution, and, with Wasson and Leary, and all of those people had actually gone down to visit Maria Sabina. She'd had a reputation, and when they left, she complained that the mushrooms no longer spoke Spanish. They spoke English, and they spoke of different things. And so that is interesting, that she was saying that they had transformed. And so this is looking at organic matter, at a mushroom. And Terence McKenna would always state that the mushroom spore can live in outer space, they found through testing, and that the mushroom could be the alien, So it's I don't mean to just kind of throw out these little cliches, though. Terence was also, people had thought that he was in the CIA. He was in East Timor in the 70s catching butterflies, and it's like, who was, why? Who's in East Timor catching butterflies, right? I mean, wasn't that this horrible war zone? I recall being at Friends World College in New York, and that was a place that was so terrible that, people stopped eating when they learned about what was going on there. It was really this, genocide of the moment. So there, there's high strangeness. Novelty was something else that Terence really focused upon, that, history goes along and it can just be going along in the same way unless something happens that shakes everyone up, right? So you could have the Christ, you could have, just different moments, the Wright brothers, I don't know. So he was, very into that, and seeing that there was more novelty as time went further. There are a couple of his book titles there. And so, it's interesting. We are I don't mean to veer off too much here. I was thinking this morning, I was kind of jotting down a few notes. One was that I just recall having a teacher, David Powell, at Evergreen. He was sort of one of the Evergreen people I liked. I think he wondered, how did he wind up there sometimes? Maybe he just loved nature. But he said he believed that novels came into being because real life can be unbelievable. And I did meet Terence at one point, not in Hawaii, weirdly, when I was living there. And it was strange because I knew who he was a little bit. It was right before moving there. I was living in New York, and I've kind of gone back to New York 90s pics. That kind of really shows the East Village. The one on top would be at maybe a yucky, busy corner. This kind of more colorful. And was living there, and then got this call that someone was looking for this lychee babysitter. And at the same time that happened, a friend, Brooke, who lived across the street from Nightingale's Bar, or as people like to call it, Nightingales, and people like Patti Smith would show up, and just play riffs, at 4 a.m. and that sort of thing. And it was just kind of a wild, artistic place with, kind of really good, cheap food, that people liked, a lot of little organic cafes and things like that. A lot of also Polish people and really great Polish restaurants. It had originally been kind of a Polish settlement, the Lower East Side and that East Village area. And a lot of the Poles stayed there and really kind of liked the crowds. And, I used to wonder about how do certain people live, like, the Velvet Underground that were just sort of known as just being really out there. That's Stromboli. That's kind of one of the few sort of pizzerias. It was more of a borscht, and I thought, well, those crazy people, they're taking all those drugs, but they're also eating borscht all day, who knows, maybe that was helping them. But, kind of a bit of a party atmosphere, old records kind of place, not the big tall buildings, more small buildings. I heard there was only one doorman building there, and that was where it was on Tompkins Square. And it was where Iggy Pop lived, among other people, until he moved to Florida because he got too cold. St. Mark's is dead, yikes. What does that mean? Maybe spiritually or what, but it was just kind of a goofy little place, St. Mark's. And then my friend who was living there, Brooke, we worked together. We worked together at law firms. We were both proofreaders, and we met as proofreaders, and we ended up just becoming really good friends. And I was always kind of in that area anyway. And he started leaving me like these funny little leaflets, like after work. He would work during the day, and I would come in the evening. Or actually, he would be there in the evening, and I would come at night. And we would exchange things. And he started showing me these Terence things. And at first I was really cynical and kind of bad about it. I just saw, it's, another guy with his little idea, on the seminar prowl. My father was a Unity minister, and I saw just millions of them. I remember seeing Muktananda as a child in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with his, Mercedes and his mega carpets inside the Mercedes in the back, where he'd had the chairs taken out. But this later we're going to get into meeting Terence and his take on the Waldorf school too. It was very funny. It's pretty short, but I think that maybe I'll try to keep going here. So I had gone to Hawaii to babysit the little lychee farm and was, watching this beautiful place, Opihikau, get decimated, but still finding kind of the beautiful spots as well. And, seeing Terence's books kind of everywhere about. So we will resume. Aloha.